In the arid hills near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, a remarkable discovery in 1945 forever changed our understanding of early Christian thought. A local farmer unearthed a large clay jar containing 13 leather-bound papyrus codices, now famously known as the Nag Hammadi Library. These texts, written in Coptic, represent a collection of Gnostic scriptures that had been hidden away for over 1,500 years, preserved from destruction, likely ordered by early church authorities. What makes these documents extraordinary is their radically different portrayal of Christian teachings, narratives, and cosmology. Unlike the canonical Gospels sanctioned by the Orthodox Church, these writings emphasize gnosis, or direct spiritual knowledge, as the path to salvation, rather than faith or institutional mediation. The text suggests that certain knowledge was deliberately excluded from the Christian canon, a revelation that invites both historical scrutiny and spiritual curiosity. Titles such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Sophia of Jesus Christ present alternative dialogues of Jesus, deep philosophical insights, and mystical cosmologies. Far from heretical ramblings, these documents were treated as sacred by early Christian communities that were eventually silenced by the growing power of orthodoxy. This suppression likely occurred during the formation of church dogma in the 4th century following the Council of Nicaea and the imperial endorsement of Christianity under Constantine. The rediscovery of these papyri has prompted scholars, theologians, and seekers alike to reevaluate early Christian diversity. They reveal that early Christianity was not monolithic, but a dynamic landscape of beliefs, some of which painted a far more mystical and introspective spiritual journey. For viewers seeking to explore the suppressed branches of Christian history, the Nag Hammadi texts open a profound window into a tradition where inner awakening and cosmic understanding were central to the spiritual path. At the heart of Gnostic teachings lies a radically different cosmology, one that redefines the origin of the universe and humanity's place within it. Unlike the traditional Christian belief in a singular, all-powerful God who created the world out of benevolence, Gnosticism introduces a layered spiritual hierarchy. In this hierarchy, the highest and most ineffable being is the original creator, often referred to as the monad or the One, a purely transcendent source that exists beyond space-time and matter. This divine source emanates a series of spiritual beings, or eons, each reflecting aspects of its nature, forming the pleroma, or fullness of divine reality. The turning point in Gnostic cosmology emerges with the figure of Sophia, an aeon, who in a moment of independent creation births a flawed entity without the consent of the monad. This being is the Demiurge, known in various texts as Yaldabaoth. Unlike the transcendent creator, the Demiurge is ignorant of the higher realms and, believing himself to be the only God, creates the material universe, a cosmos that is fundamentally flawed and tainted by his limitations. This narrative offers a profound explanation for the suffering and imperfection found in the physical world. According to the Gnostics, the material realm is not a divine paradise, but a prison crafted by a being disconnected from true spiritual light. The Demiurge is often depicted as arrogant, sometimes even malevolent, enforcing a reality governed by illusion, ignorance, and control. In this schema, human souls are seen as divine sparks trapped within physical bodies, a direct result of Sophia's fall and the Demiurge's creation. Salvation, therefore, comes not through external worship, but through gnosis, the inner awakening to one's true divine origin, which enables the soul to ascend beyond the Demiurge's dominion. This dualism between the spiritual and the material, the perfect and the imperfect, is central to Gnostic thought and presents a striking departure from mainstream Christian doctrine. For viewers seeking deeper meaning in spiritual history, Gnostic cosmology offers a compelling reinterpretation of creation. It challenges the assumption that suffering is part of a divine plan, and instead proposes that enlightenment comes from recognizing the illusion of the world and reclaiming one's spiritual heritage beyond the material veil. One of the most provocative revelations in Gnostic literature is the concept of multiple universes, an idea that not only deviates from traditional Judeo-Christian cosmology, but also aligns intriguingly with modern theories in physics. This concept is most vividly illustrated in the Gnostic text, the Sophia of Jesus Christ, which describes the creation of 12 distinct universes, each governed by a spiritual being or angel. These universes are not simply parallel dimensions, but are understood as emanations from the divine realm, each reflecting a facet of the original creator's intention before the cosmic flaw emerged. According to this text, these 12 universes were created in perfect harmony, intended to function as channels of divine energy and spiritual order. However, the balance was disrupted by a critical event known as the flaw in the subordinate. This flaw occurred when Sophia, acting independently from the divine fullness, created the Demiurge. Her act introduced imperfection into an otherwise immaculate design. This imperfection didn't just affect one universe, it reverberated across the spiritual realms, ultimately giving rise to the material world under the Demiurge's rule. The story suggests that our universe, with its suffering and physical limitations, exists as an outlier, a distorted echo of a pure cosmic structure. This Gnostic vision presents reality as multi-layered, with each universe holding different laws and levels of consciousness. Such a view resonates with contemporary scientific discussions around the multiverse string theory and quantum dimensions fields that propose our reality may be just one of many coexisting realms. While the language and metaphysics differ, the underlying message is the same: reality is far more complex, dynamic, and mysterious than it appears at the surface. For viewers exploring the intersection of spirituality and science, this ancient Gnostic teaching offers a rich symbolic framework. It invites us to consider the possibility that what we perceive as the universe may be only a fraction of existence. Within this vision, spiritual awakening involves not only escaping the illusions of the material world, but also reconnecting with a much broader divine architecture that spans multiple levels of reality, each one holding keys to deeper truths. Within Gnostic cosmology, the human experience is not accidental, nor is it merely the result of divine benevolence. Instead, humanity is portrayed as a crucial element in a larger metaphysical drama, a cosmic tragedy sparked by the flawed creation of the material world. Gnostics believe that within every human being lies a fragment of divine essence, a spark of the true creator trapped within the confines of the physical body. This body, born of the Demiurge's imperfect design, serves as both a vessel and a prison, limiting the soul's awareness of its origin and true nature. The Gnostic view redefines the purpose of life. Rather than aiming to obey external commandments or seek salvation through institutional religion, the ultimate goal is inner awakening, what Gnostics call gnosis. This gnosis is not intellectual knowledge, but direct experiential awareness of one's divine origin. The path to gnosis involves deep introspection, spiritual practices, and a rejection of the material illusions perpetuated by the Demiurge. Only through this process can the soul begin to remember its true home in the pleroma, the realm of divine fullness, and begin the journey of return. This spiritual journey is deeply personal and often framed as a kind of resurrection in consciousness. While the physical body may remain in the flawed world, the awakened soul gradually ascends through various layers of reality, transcending the control of the Demiurge and his archons, ruling spirits of the material domains. Reincarnation is also present in some Gnostic traditions, seen as a cycle of entrapment in which souls return repeatedly until they achieve the gnosis necessary for liberation. For contemporary viewers, this narrative offers an empowering reframe of human suffering and spiritual seeking. It suggests that the trials of life are not punishments or tests from a divine overlord, but symptoms of being trapped in a realm not meant to be our final dwelling. Through awareness, insight, and spiritual effort, one can pierce the veil of illusion, break free from the cosmic error, and reclaim their place in the divine order. This perspective not only challenges mainstream religious interpretations, but invites a more introspective, liberating vision of what it means to be truly human. Gnostic texts present a radically different portrayal of Jesus, one that diverges sharply from the narrative found in the canonical Gospels. Rather than emphasizing Jesus as a divine figure sent to die for humanity's sins, the Gnostic view highlights him as a revealer of hidden truths, a spiritual guide whose primary mission was to awaken humanity to its divine origin. In this tradition, Jesus is not merely a messianic figure, but a transmitter of gnosis, direct transformative knowledge that liberates the soul from the illusions of the material world. His teachings are esoteric, intended for those capable of inner understanding, and often delivered in the form of cryptic sayings or dialogues that challenge surface-level interpretations. The Gospel of Thomas is one of the most notable Gnostic texts in this context. It contains a series of sayings attributed to Jesus, many of which focus on the idea that the kingdom of God is not a distant realm, but a state of consciousness accessible through inner discovery. For instance, Jesus says, "The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you," a phrase that encapsulates the Gnostic emphasis on inward spiritual realization rather than external worship or ritual adherence. Equally revolutionary is the portrayal of Mary Magdalene in texts like the Gospel of Philip and the Gospel of Mary. Here she is not merely a follower, but a central figure in Jesus' spiritual circle, described as his closest companion and the one who truly understands his teachings. The Gospel of Philip even refers to her as the companion of the Savior and describes her as being loved more than the other disciples, sparking tension among them. This depiction challenges the traditional male-dominated hierarchy of early Christianity and suggests that women held significant spiritual authority in Gnostic communities. One particularly controversial passage appears in the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus speaks of transforming Mary into a male so that she too may become a living spirit. This isn't about gender in a literal sense, but rather reflects Gnostic symbolism, where male represents spiritual completeness and transcendence. The statement implies that salvation and enlightenment are not limited by gender, but accessible to all who seek gnosis. For modern viewers, these alternative depictions invite a reconsideration of long-held beliefs about Jesus' message and the role of women in spiritual leadership. The Gnostic Gospels do not diminish the significance of Jesus. Instead, they present him as a teacher of profound inner truths, guiding souls toward liberation rather than obedience. In this light, Mary Magdalene emerges not as a peripheral figure, but as a spiritual exemplar, someone who embodies the very essence of Gnostic awakening. This perspective continues to inspire contemporary seekers who resonate with a more inclusive mystical path of spiritual discovery. One of the most astonishing revisions found in Gnostic literature is the portrayal of Judas Iscariot, not as a traitor, but as the most enlightened of Jesus' disciples. This controversial perspective is most explicitly outlined in the Gospel of Judas, a 2nd century Gnostic text discovered in a papyrus codex in the 1970s and made public in the early 2000s. Unlike the canonical Gospels, which depict Judas as the ultimate betrayer whose actions lead to Jesus' crucifixion, this text presents him as acting in direct obedience to Jesus' request. According to the narrative, Jesus reveals to Judas esoteric knowledge about the cosmos, the soul, and the divine realms, entrusting him with a mission that the other disciples could not understand. In this version of the story, Jesus explains that his material body must be relinquished so his spiritual self can return to the pleroma, the divine fullness beyond the material world. Judas, alone among the disciples, grasps the necessity of this act. He agrees to hand Jesus over to the authorities, not out of greed or malice, but as part of a larger divine plan understood only through gnosis. The text directly challenges conventional morality by suggesting that Judas's betrayal was in fact a sacred duty that allowed Jesus to transcend the limitations of the physical world and fulfill his true purpose. The Gospel of Judas also introduces unique cosmological concepts, including a realm of luminous clouds and divine beings that exist beyond the corrupted material world. God in this Gnostic vision is not a singular anthropomorphic entity, but an expansive field of divine light unbound by human characteristics. The Demiurge and his archons are again portrayed as lesser ignorant beings who govern the physical universe and seek to trap souls in cycles of confusion and suffering. Judas's role then becomes a bridge between these realms. He acts as a facilitator of liberation, not a destroyer of faith. For viewers accustomed to traditional Christian teachings, this interpretation may be both shocking and illuminating. It compels us to question how historical narratives are shaped, who decides which texts are preserved or excluded, and what truths may lie hidden in the stories we thought we understood. In the Gnostic worldview, spiritual truth often resides beneath appearances, and figures once vilified may carry deeper redemptive significance. This radical re-examination of Judas challenges us to look beyond labels and seek a more nuanced understanding of sacrifice, loyalty, and divine purpose. In stark contrast to the anthropomorphic and often judgmental deity of Orthodox Christian doctrine, Gnostic texts present a radically transcendent vision of God, one that redefines the very nature of divinity. This ultimate divine source, often called the monad, is described not in terms of gender, personality, or physical form, but as a boundless essence of pure light, silence, and consciousness. The monad exists beyond time, space, and duality, and cannot be fully comprehended by the human mind. It is the origin of all being, yet it remains untouched by the flawed material world created by the Demiurge. For Gnostics, this God is not a ruler to be feared, but a presence to be remembered and reunited with through inner awakening. The Gospel of Judas and other Gnostic writings describe the divine as a luminous cloud of light, a symbolic representation of purity, wholeness, and spiritual knowledge. This light is not confined to any single form or doctrine. Instead, it permeates all creation, invisibly waiting to be discovered by the awakened soul. The material world shaped by the Demiurge conceals this light beneath layers of illusion and falsehood. Thus, the spiritual journey in Gnosticism is not about obeying commandments or performing rituals, but about stripping away these layers to perceive the divine directly. This reinterpretation of divinity also reconfigures the role of Jesus. In Gnostic texts, Jesus is a fully awakened being, not sent by the Demiurge, but by the higher unknowable source. He comes not to demand worship, but to guide souls back to remembrance, to remind them of their divine spark, and teach them how to rise above the constraints of the material realm. His parables, symbols, and secret sayings are keys to unlocking higher consciousness, not merely moral teachings. For modern viewers, this understanding of God as an impersonal, yet intimately present source of spiritual light offers a refreshing alternative to fear-based religious narratives. It aligns with many contemporary spiritual movements that emphasize personal experience, inner peace, and cosmic unity. The Gnostic vision encourages us to see the divine not as an external figure of judgment, but as the deepest truth within ourselves, waiting to be revealed through introspection, courage, and gnosis. This transformation in how we relate to God has profound implications, inviting a more compassionate, inclusive, and mystical path to spiritual fulfillment. Among the more controversial elements of Gnostic cosmology is its pointed critique of traditional religious rituals and the structures that uphold them. In texts like the Gospel of Philip, common practices, such as baptism and communion, are not only questioned, but reinterpreted in ways that challenge the foundations of Orthodox Christianity. The Gnostic perspective holds that many outward rituals, especially when practiced without inner understanding, become empty forms, distractions from the true goal of spiritual awakening. These texts argue that rituals designed to offer salvation often serve to entrench individuals further within the illusions of the material world which is ruled by the Demiurge. One striking example is the Gnostic interpretation of the Eucharist. While mainstream Christianity views communion as a sacred reenactment of Jesus' Last Supper, symbolizing union with Christ through the consumption of bread and wine, Gnostic texts like the Gospel of Philip refer to this act as a form of cannibalism when taken literally. This sharp criticism is not a mockery of faith, but rather a challenge to the idea that salvation can be achieved through external acts. Instead, Gnostics argue that true communion with the divine occurs internally through direct experiential knowledge and inner transformation, not through the consumption of symbolic elements. Furthermore, the Gnostic rejection of religious authority reflects a broader concern about the institutionalization of spiritual truth. Early Gnostic communities viewed ecclesiastical hierarchies as perpetuating the ignorance of the Demiurge, enforcing dogma that suppresses personal spiritual experience. They believed that true knowledge of God could not be mediated by priests or confined within creeds. It had to arise from within. This decentralized and highly personal approach to spirituality was seen as dangerous by the early church, which sought to unify belief and practice under centralized control. For viewers exploring spiritual alternatives, the Gnostic critique opens a space for rethinking the role of tradition and authority in one's own faith journey. It encourages a shift from passive adherence to doctrines toward an active, introspective engagement with the divine. While not dismissing the value of ritual entirely, Gnosticism invites us to ask, do these practices awaken deeper awareness, or do they simply maintain appearances? This question remains relevant today, especially for those seeking authenticity and depth in their spiritual lives beyond the boundaries of formal religion. The Gnostic Gospels reveal a hidden dimension of early Christianity, one where spiritual knowledge, not blind obedience, leads to liberation. They challenge us to look beyond surface beliefs, to question the nature of reality, and to awaken the divine spark within. If this journey into forgotten truths and cosmic mysteries resonated with you, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel for more insights bridging ancient wisdom and modern consciousness, and take the first step toward your own spiritual awakening.